Check it out, Casper!
Hey everyone, and thanks for tuning in. Casper here. Now you might remember from my Everything We Know About the Pyro update video that I mentioned Valve said they're going to do a blog post with a bunch of proposed weapon balance changes before they actually put those into the game. And I said that we haven't had that blog post yet, therefore the Pyro update isn't imminent. Good news, we have had that blog post now. And I'm going to spend this video going through that list and giving my thoughts and feelings on all the major ideas in that list. If you don't care about that and you just want to read the list yourself, the link is in the description. So let's just get straight into this. The very first one that they mention is the panic attack, because it's one of their least used weapons. And what they do have with almost every change here, if not every single change that they've suggested on this list, is why they are thinking about it. And this is a really cool sort of transparency thing, a look into their minds, which is something that we don't normally get. So basically the reason that they're saying that the panic attack needs a change is not only because it's least used, in other words, you know, the fewest people in the game have this equipped out of any other weapon, but also because it doesn't really fulfill its role. In other words, you're likely to pull this out when you, for some reason, you can't use your primary weapon. So you might be panicking, as the name suggests, but because of this delayed firing, it didn't really serve its purpose. You couldn't use it in a sort of panicked situation. So they completely redesigned it. There's none of this load your bullets up and then let them all go like the Beggar's Bazooka anymore. Instead, it's got 50% faster switch to speed. So in other words, you're panicking so you can get to this really quickly. Good idea. 50% more pellets and 30% less damage. So what that basically means is, because it's a shotgun, it's made up of loads of little bullets, essentially. But each of those bullets is doing a little bit less damage, however, there is more of them. So basically, if you hit the majority of those pellets, you will be doing more damage. Also does something completely unique, where it gets less accurate for the longer you hold the button down. So I'll just do a really rough sort of circle diagram here. Imagine you're holding the mouse one button down, it goes doof, 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 doof. Every time you shoot, you're getting less accurate, essentially. So I think that's a good idea, and it's one of those things which I think you've got to play with it to really understand its usefulness, and maybe those values will get tweaked a bit, but I think the mechanics behind it are a good idea. Next up, we've got a few changes suggested to the spy. Now, they believe that the ambassador is too strong at headshots across the map. You can literally do 102 damage at any range. There's no damage fall off for a critical hit. So their suggested change to reduce this effectiveness is to make the first bullet less accurate. Now, I really don't think that introducing randomness is the way to balance anything. And personally, if I get headshot from across the map and it turns out that it was a spy, I think, bloody hell, well done to you. If someone can hit a tiny pixel-sized head on the opposite side of the map, then they deserve it, in my opinion. My initial thought when I read this was that it's actually designed to stop hackers. It's designed to make it difficult to hack with the ambassador because maybe they can't hack that randomized value, that bullet spread. But other than that, I don't really think it's necessary personally. I don't even use the ambassador that often myself because I'm not that good at aiming, especially at further range. So I appreciate that if someone is that good, then they deserve the reward. But I don't think it's going to be a complete destruction of the weapon if they do make this change, but my view is that it's not necessary. Again, they're nerfing the Dead Ringer. This weapon is extremely divisive. Basically, the nerf that they've suggested is that ammo kits and dispensers no longer refill the Dead Ringer. So basically, you set off a Dead Ringer, you see him run away, there's nothing he can do to make his cloak come back faster. It takes the maximum amount of time for that cloak to refill. Now, as I said, this is the most divisive weapon in the game. There's going to be people who agree vehemently with me and people who think I'm an absolute idiot for whatever I say about this weapon. So, in my opinion, and again, I will always say this, I am just one opinion, one perspective, so you're perfectly welcome to feel completely differently to me, but I've never had a problem fighting Dead Ringer spies. And a lot of people who have got a lot of hours, a lot of experience in this game, will identify a dead ring maybe 90% of the time, and then at least 50% of the time after that, they'll be able to follow the spy to wherever he's gone and finish him off. Or at least understand that he's not going to be a threat. But then on the other side of the coin, there's the newer player who this is an absolute ball ache for. And it's difficult. Who do you balance this game for? The newer players, the experienced players, the people in the middle? Not every weapon is going to be suited to everyone on that spectrum, essentially, of player skill. So this is obviously targeting the lower end player to try and make the Dead Ringer less spammable, and I appreciate that. You don't want the Dead Ringer to be spammable. So my personal suggestion, a tweak to their idea, would be rather than ammo kits and dispensers don't do anything, there's actually a delay. So say you uncloak, you've finished your dead ring feign. Let's just say there's a 3-second delay before ammo kits and dispensers will do anything to your cloak. That makes it then so the spy can't just immediately pick up an ammo kit and spam, but it also means that if the spy has been successful in getting away, getting to some sort of safe place, then don't bore the player. Don't make him wait, I don't know, however long it is for it to fill up on its own. He's out of the way now. So after those 3 seconds, or, you know, that could be tweaked, let him pick it up. That's my personal thoughts, as is basically everything in this video. Next is your eternal reward. So the big drawback of your eternal reward is that you couldn't disguise with it. So it made getting that first stab quite difficult. So what they've actually done is added a new mechanic where you can disguise with your eternal rewards, but it drains your entire cloak when you do it. I think this is a nice idea. It gives you an opportunity to actually not have to rely on getting that first stab. But there is a drawback where now your cloak drains 50% quicker, so you can only stay invisible for half as long, whatever watch you're using. But I think that sounds quite harsh, and it almost makes it not worth using this weapon. But I do think that's one of the ones which is hard to judge just by reading it, and you've really got to play with it to sort of fully appreciate. So I do like the idea, and maybe that, again, the values might need to be tweaked a little bit, but I think it's a step in the right direction. Now a few changes for the Scout. The Sandman is getting a fairly large change. The main thing that they've said here is that they want to remove its ability to completely make you unable to use your weapon. They agree that that's a stupid mechanic and it shouldn't be in competitive video games. Yet one of the most competitive games of the last 2 years seems to use it a lot, but... So essentially now you will always be able to slow someone down, but they'll still be able to fire their weapon. And it also does increase damage now after a certain amount of distance. And the ball regenerates faster. So basically they're saying, look, you're never going to be able to freeze someone in place and make them completely unable to do anything, but everything that you can do with this weapon is now slightly more useful. A change which I think is, okay, yeah, I got nothing wrong with this. I think it's a good idea. It probably doesn't outweigh the other weapons that the Scout can use in his melee slot, but it's not useless. They've also said that the Bonk Atomic Puncher is too powerful. Now, in the pub server sort of way, you rarely see this weapon causing any problems. You don't think, oh god, that Bonk Scout, again, he's destroying us. But I'm assuming that this is more from a competitive perspective, maybe. But essentially, they just added a drawback as soon as the bonk wears off. Depending on how much damage that you've taken, you will be slowed down a larger amount for 5 seconds after that. So if you've taken a lot of damage, you'll go really slow for 5 seconds. If you've taken a little bit of damage, you'll go a little bit slow for 5 seconds. I don't see anything wrong with this. It sort of makes sense. Like, once it's worn off, you've sort of done what you wanted to do. But if you are trying to get behind people and they're chasing you down, and then all of a sudden you're going really slow after you've used it, then maybe this is nullifying that particular use of the weapon. Maybe it should just be used as a distraction tool. Obviously, that's not going to make anybody use it more in pubs now, but maybe it'll have an impact for competitive players. I'm not really sure. Pretty Boy's Pocket Pistol has been completely redesigned to now actually give you health on hits plus 7. It's got a slightly smaller clip size, but it's got an increased firing speed. I think this is fine. And it's a good idea for a secondary weapon. Again, you're going to pull this out after you've run out of primary ammo, probably. So you might be using it in a desperate situation just to finish someone off, or a runaway tool. So having that 7 health per hit is actually might save your life as you're ending a fight. So yeah, I think that's a good idea. I'd like to give it a go, but I might carry on using the Winger as my favourite. Who knows? Next up, we've got the Criticola, which is one of the most hated weapons in the competitive world because it's too powerful in the right hands. So they've removed the speed bonus, and they've changed the damage penalty now. So every time you attack whilst you use this weapon, you get 5 seconds of debuff, but it doesn't stack together. So essentially, as soon as you attack after you've drunk this, so it still gives you mini crits, you're going to take mini crits as well. And obviously, if you fire one shot just as it's ending, there's still 5 seconds then after you fire that shot that you are still taking mini crits. I think this is a good balance for it. It sort of makes it the same risk as it is a reward. So yeah, good on them. I think this is a great idea. Atomizer is also getting a change because they basically felt that it was too powerful and you couldn't even tell when someone was going to have a triple jump because you couldn't actually see the atomizer if they had their scattergun out, for example. So they've changed it now that you only get the triple jump with the atomizer drawn. So you definitely know that someone's got that potential when you're versing them that they might triple jump. You don't take self-damage when you triple jump anymore. And it also does base melee damage. But it does deploy 50% slower. So that means you can't really just switch to it in midair, do a triple jump, and easily switch back to your scattergun and almost like reap the benefits of that triple jump regardless. But they have added the ability for it to do airborne mini crits. It's kind of like a Market Gardener, except Scout's base melee damage is quite low anyway, and it's a mini crit. And it still has minus 15% damage to players. So it's not the Market Gardener for the Scout, but it's the similar sort of idea. When you're triple jumping, you're likely to be in the air a lot, so they might as well give it a bonus for being in the air. They completely changed the flying guillotine. It no longer crits against stunned players, and it no longer mini crits at long range. Instead, long range just makes it recharge faster, and they've also reduced whatever that long range was. I think the main reason that they're doing this is because with the new Sandman, this could be too powerful, so they're just getting rid of that combo. Unfortunately, that combo was basically the only fun thing about this. Doing bleed at medium range, if you could land an arcing shot, isn't that useful in the Team Fortress world. I think you'd be better off with a pistol personally, because what this is sort of suggesting is that you enter a fight with your secondary weapon and then start using your primary, as where the typical dynamic would be you fight with your primary until you can't anymore and then you use your secondary. So I think it might have some use, but most people will still find a pistol more useful. It'd be nice to see if they could keep that combo with the Sandman in some way without making it too powerful and too obnoxious. I know that one hit or nearly one hit combo kills are really annoying. Nobody wants to be insta-killed by something that they couldn't avoid. So I do think, personally, more thought needs to go into what to do with this weapon, because right now, I can't really see any reason for someone to use it. Base Jumper's getting a nerf, by quite a lot actually. They've reduced the amount of air control while it's deployed, so you won't be able to move as freely once you're in the air, and you won't be able to redeploy the parachute after you've undeployed it. So what you could do before is parachute down, go a little bit, undo the parachute so you fall fastly, and then do the parachute again. Basically they're saying this just made it too hard to hit people and it was just unfun to play again. So they're making it easier to hit someone in the air. Always a weapon that I felt was a bit of a gimmick anyway, so I don't think that this is really going to affect it that much. It's still got its gimmick, it's just slightly less annoying now to play against. Man Treads is actually getting a buff, thank God. Now air blasts are less effective against you, they don't push you so much whilst you're in the air, and you've also got plus 200% air control after you've blast jumped, so after you've rocket jumped. This is really cool, this gives you so much more control in the air after you've done a rocket jump, so therefore it's easier to land on someone's head. Or of course easier to hit them with a Market Gardener if you're using that combo. I think this is really good. It remains to see if this actually becomes more useful than the gunboats now, or whether it still just stays as sort of a joke, but a fun joke to play, the Trollja loadout. I think maybe it could still do with a slight damage increase, but I don't want to commit to that until we've actually seen how this works. But good idea, Man Treads needed a buff. They've completely rebuilt the Darwin's Danger Shield, which was one of the other stupidest weapons, especially from a competitive standpoint, because it basically meant that if a sniper used it, the other sniper had to use it, otherwise he was at a straight disadvantage. So now basically it's just there to counter pyros. You've got afterburn immunity, so you can't get lit on fire, and you also resist fire by 50%. I think this is good, and it's a much better direction than what it used to be. Razorback is also getting a couple of changes, where now it's got a minus 100% overheal penalty. So whatever overheal would take you up to now, it only takes you to half of that. That's how I interpret that stat. Or you can't get overheal. Not 100% sure how to interpret that number there. But also, it regenerates after 30 seconds. Now, I understand why they're doing this, because if a sniper gets pocketed in competitive play, that is an extremely powerful thing. So they're trying to stop this happening. They're trying to stop a sniper in competitive just becoming an unkillable machine who can one-shot any of the other team if he charges up. So the sniper now has to weigh up in his mind, do I want to be pocketed by my medic, or do I want to be invulnerable to backstabs? I think it's good from a competitive standpoint, but this does absolutely nothing for your average pub sniper who isn't really getting overhealed ever. I still think the Razorback is too strong, because it can completely nullify a one-shot kill. And not only does it stop that one-shot kill, but it also stuns the person who did it. I always thought of this as the equivalent of medic having a helmet, that when the sniper shoots the helmet, not only does it do nothing to the medic, but it also stuns the sniper for 3 seconds. That sounds ridiculous, and no one would be happy if that got added to the game. Now, I appreciate the fact that the backstab is a guaranteed one-shot kill, so something against that is probably a good idea. So I think what the Razorback should do instead is something like make a backstab actually just act as if it was a normal knife poke, so it does like 30 to 40 damage or whatever it is. I know not everyone will agree with me on that, but regardless, this is a nice idea for competitive, but it's probably going to do nothing for pubs. For medic, the first up is the Vitasaur. Now again, from a competitive standpoint, this weapon was broken because if you died, you could retain some of your Uber. Now in competitive, the whole thing revolves around pushing with an Uber. So this sort of took a bit of risk out of the medic ever dying and almost gave like a straight upgrade to not having it. So they've created a brand new mechanic now where you harvest organs. So it's almost like the Ubersaur, but instead of boosting your Uber now, it allows you to retain Uber on death. So if you hit someone 4 times with the Vitasaur and you had over 60% Uber, you would still retain that 60% Uber. It caps at 60%. So I like the idea. They're basically making it more skillful in order to actually get this Uber retention. But the problem I see is still there. You're still able to retain Uber. Obviously, it's much less likely to happen now, and I'm not deep in there with the Sixes meta or the Sixes community these days, so I don't really know how they're going to feel about this, but obviously it's a step in the right direction. It's not so easy as it used to be. Crusader's crossbow has just had a slight change, so now when it builds Uber, which they added to it quite recently, it builds in the same way that the Medigun builds Uber. So before, you used to be able to heal someone with the crossbow, and relative to the amount of health you healed, you would actually gain more Uber than if you'd healed them with a regular Medigun. You know, any of the Mediguns, that is, just for clarity. So now they've made it the same. I think that's absolutely fine. That makes perfect sense. There's no reason that healing at range should be more powerful than the regular Medigun. At the end of the day, the benefit of healing at range is that you can heal at range, so it doesn't need extra benefits. They've sort of undone some changes to the miniguns, where there used to be damage penalties as soon as you started firing, but now they've changed it so it's only a damage penalty as soon as you start spinning up. So if you're spinning up for a couple of seconds and then you start firing, you're fine. You've already passed that period of damage penalties. I think that's fine. Heavy's, at least from observation, one of the least played classes, or one of the classes that people don't tend to play because it's a bit boring, I guess, so increasing it in this way is probably a good thing. I'm going to summarise these next 3, the Gloves of Running Urgently, the Eviction Notice, and the Fists of Steel. They've all had slight changes, mainly to make them less powerful in competitive. Obviously, Heavy's slow, so giving him a weapon that makes him go fast, the Gloves of Running Urgently, is not something that you want to sort of just make a straight upgrade to his drawback. You know, he's really strong, but he's really slow, so he needs to stay slow for him to really have his drawbacks. So what they've done, they've tweaked this now so he actually drains health while he's using the Gloves of Running Urgently, but any health that you lose whilst using them comes back after you put them away. And a similar thing with the Eviction Notice, which nobody's saying is too strong, but it's sort of to counter that, they have made it so now you no longer have the damage vulnerability. And again, Fists of Steel, they were too strong, especially if you had a medic healing you. So they've changed it now so there's 40% reduction in the overheal whilst you're using them, and there's 40% healing rate penalty. So as I said, this is focused more towards competitive mode, where people would just sponge the damage, maybe just sit on the control point with the medic hiding somewhere, and capture that point with massive, massive damage reduction, and being healed at the same time, to sort of capture the point without really earning it, I guess, is the sort of perspective there. So this is just simply less viable now. Again, nice idea. So the very last thing we're going to talk about in this quite long video, I'll keep it as brief as I can, is the Rescue Ranger. And essentially they've changed this now so it also consumes metal when you're healing a building, and they've said it's a 4:1 health to metal ratio. So in other words, if you heal 60 damage, it uses up 15 metal. I think this makes a lot of sense. Obviously, you're the same thing as you do with a wrench. You're healing the building, that uses up metal. So when you're doing it at range, it should also use the metal. Now, Engineer is probably my least played class. Or certainly I don't think I've ever even equipped the Rescue Ranger. So I can't give you an Engineer's perspective on this. But all I can tell you is that that actually makes sense. Whether that sounds like too much of a nerf, I'm not qualified to say. Now, Valve do encourage everyone, as many people as possible, to give their feedback. On the page that I've linked in the description, there's a contact us area on the right. Go on there, give them your feedback if you definitely disagree or definitely agree with any of their feedback options here, and you will definitely have that chance to impact what ends up in the game. I've already sent mine, essentially everything I've told you here, and I'm hoping that hundreds, if not thousands, of other people have done the same. Don't worry if your favourite class or weapon wasn't mentioned. They do make it very clear that this isn't everything. This is just some of the ideas that they've got. We know, based on the nature of the update, most of the changes are going to be to the Pyro. So fingers crossed they're as exciting and well thought out as pretty much everything we've seen in this list. So thanks everyone for watching, and I'll see you all again.
Someone told me that I'm special.